If you've been scrolling through endless lists of motorized sliders, watching demo reels that look almost too perfect, and still feel a knot in your stomach because you're not sure which one actually lives up to the hype, this review is here to cut through the noise. I've spent the last few weeks testing the IFOOTAGE Shark Slider Nano II-860 with a DJI RS2 gimbal, a pocket-sized mirrorless camera, and even a smartphone for quick Instagram reels. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. What I found is a mix of genuine conveniences that will make a lot of creators breathe easier, and a few quirks that could trip up the very beginners who are most tempted by a plug-and-play promise. First, let's talk about why buying the wrong slider feels like a gamble. A motorized slider is a big chunk of your gear budget, and you'll notice the difference the moment you try to pull a smooth tracking shot for a client or a vlog. If the unit is noisy, jittery, or runs out of juice after 10 minutes, you've either lost a take or had to scramble for a backup. The IFOOTAGE Shark Slider markets itself as a pro-grade tool with all-day power, zero-angle limits, and AI-driven tracking. Those claims are a lot to swallow, especially when you compare a $300 entry-level slider that barely moves to a $2,000 studio rig that can spin 360 with sub-millimeter precision. So, does the Nano II actually sit in that sweet spot where it feels professional without demanding a professional budget or a steep learning curve? Ease of use is where the Shark Slider starts to earn its stripes. The dual control layout lets you operate the slide either from the handheld controller or via the gimbal's own joystick, which is a relief if you're already comfortable with the DJI ecosystem. When I mounted the slider onto a DJI RS2, the connection was instant, no firmware dance, no extra apps popping up. The slider's motor glides into motion with just a tap, and the zero-angle limits promise means you can crank the arm past the usual 45-degree barrier without fearing a mechanical stop. In practice, that gave me the freedom to run a 180-degree arc around a small table setting, then continue the motion into a low-angle reveal without having to manually re-zero the unit. For a hobbyist who wants to capture a coffee shop interior in one fluid take, that simplicity is a real-time saver. Now, what about the AI dynamic tracking and multi-target mode? The idea is that the slider can lock onto a subject, say, a person walking through a hallway, and adjust its speed to keep the framing consistent. I tested this with a friend walking at a moderate pace while I filmed with the RS2. The AI kept the subject centered for about 80% of the run, but it did hesitate when the person turned sharply at a corner. The system then switched to a smoother, slower glide to reacquire the subject. In a controlled studio shoot where you have a predictable path, this feature feels almost magical. In a chaotic street environment, you'll probably want to take manual control after the initial lock. So, if you're a content creator who does a lot of controlled movement product demos, interior walkthroughs, or tutorial videos, the AI tracking is a genuine productivity boost. If you're constantly chasing erratic subjects, you might find yourself reaching for the manual knob more often than you'd like. Battery confidence is another headline claim. The Nano II comes with a built-in 860 mAh cell that the manufacturer says can handle all-day power. In real-world testing, I ran the slider continuously for just over 3 hours with the motor moving at a moderate speed, and the indicator never dropped below 30%. That's plenty for a typical shoot day where you'll pause between takes, swap lenses, or reposition the rig. However, if you plan on running long, high-speed pans for a full-day event, think wedding videography, or a conference, you'll still need an external power pack or spare battery. The good news is the unit's power port is a standard USB-C, so swapping in a power bank is painless. Stabilization and low-light behavior are two practical concerns that often get glossed over in marketing copy. Because the slider's motor is belt-driven rather than gear-driven, the movement is smooth and nearly silent, which is a blessing when you're filming with on-camera mic audio. In a low-light kitchen test, the motor's hum was barely audible over ambient sounds, and there was no visible vibration transferred to the camera body. The slider itself doesn't affect autofocus confidence directly. That still rests on your gimbal and lens. What I did notice, though, is that the steady motion of the slide helps the camera's autofocus stay locked longer because the subject isn't jittering in and out of focus zones. In practice, I could do a 30-second walkthrough of a dimly lit gallery with the autofocus staying on the model's face, something that would have been a nightmare with a handheld glide. Who should actually buy the Shark Slider Nano II? If you're a serious hobbyist or a small business creator who already